Good afternoon. Thank you so much for being here. It's been a wonderful Congress, mapping the magazine with so many insights and wonderful perspectives and sharing of data, memories about magazines and other precious information. So this panel, the sixth one, is called Theory and History of Magazines. And we have three wonderful researchers to talk about their researches. We will have Álvaro Costa de Matos from Nova University of Lisbon in Portugal, with a paper presentation called Magazines as Sources, Objects of Study and Interdisciplinary Laboratories in Social and Human Sciences, Epistemological Problematization. Then we will have Ibrahim Omera from Tanta University from Egypt, with a presentation called I do not know what is in your newspaper, Content Analysis of Braille Magazines. And finally, we will have Maria Filomena Barradas from Polytechnic Institute of Porto Alegre from Portugal too, with a presentation called Generation Kappa, Mapping the Magazine Early 90s through Kappa Magazine. So we will hear and see all the presentations. Your sound will be off, but you can to ensure that the streaming is in good conditions, and then you can use the chat to make all the questions you have about the three presentations. You can do it anytime. We will answer those questions in the end of all presentations, okay? So we will start with Álvaro Costa de Matos. Álvaro, welcome to the Congress, and we are expecting your data from this presentation. You can activate your sound.
Okay. Thank you, Dora. Good afternoon, everyone. The conference I'm going to present deals with the epistemology of history, namely the history of magazines. It results from the many investigations I did on the history of magazines in Portugal in the 19th and 20th century. I studied mainly political and cultural magazines, and that study resulted in some questions and reflections that I would like to share with you here. A little introduction. In the histories of Portugal, rigorous and in-depth studies about magazines and their role in society are rare. In fact, this type of approach does not abound in more general historiographic studies, as well as in the more specialized monographies. Even the exceptions, such as volume 6 in Eastern Portugal, written by Rui Ramos, in the chapter that is dedicated to the intellectual nation, where it analyzes the press, the historian gives little or no attention to magazines, to their importance in the formation of national identity, in the dissemination of ideological, political, social, cultural, and even aesthetic values, and in the creation of informed and critical public opinion. It's true that after 1994, that things have changed and improved a little. Some books, articles in magazines were published in scientific magazines. We remember the works of Clara Rocha, José Augusto Seabra, João Medina, Fernando Farel Lopes, Armando Luís de Carvalho Homem, Daniel Pires, Luís Crespo de Andrade, Álvaro Costa de Matos, Carla Rodrigues XIV, Carlos Luís Cardoso, peço desculpa, sorry, among others. And no less relevant, writing new entries for thematic dictionaries. But also aim of some studies, the magazines still do not deserve the epistemological attention due to research and cultural history, namely in the history of journalism, the periodical press and censorship, despite being an exhaustible source of factual, informative and visual information about a particular historical era. Therefore, it is important to place this type of press in its proper place, as source and object of study of crucial importance in the social and human science, and in modern and contemporary history in particular, for which we make apology here for the study of magazines from a historical perspective. Consequently, in the history of magazines, we must have a new epistemological attitude, both from the point of view of the heuristic of history and of hermeneutics, based in turn on an equally new theoretical and methodological approach, which is what we propose next. About theory. The importance of magazines, regardless of their journalistic genre, is too obvious, because in them we also find the facts that move the wheel of history and allow us to reconstitute the human past in its multiple dynamics: cultural, mental, and even economical. We talk about the reconstruction of the past. Well, the magazines as source and object of study to be apprehended in their totality by the historians and his readers must be contextualized, the only way we do not run the risk of falling into various anachronisms. In other words, the magazines have to be duly inscribed in the lived concrete and its potentialities. That is, inscribed in the multiple circumstances of the past, carried out by individuals or groups or groups of individuals who, in this way, created events, facts, and actions that are important to record, problematize, and narrate. Why? Because the reconstruction and analytical approach of its historical context, time and space, explains the birth of these publications that we study with enthusiasm, help us to understand why they were founded, published, and disseminated in a given historical time. What are your editorial proposals? What doctrines and ideas they defended? Whether they were born for contestatory, oppositional, or on the contrary, as defended interests? What alternatives they advocate? What movements defended? Which systems, regimes, and political solutions were intended to implement in place of systems, regimes, and solutions which not infrequently fiercely fought, in some cases endangering the lives of the founders, directors, editors, journalists, and literacy and artistic. Consequently, magazines also appear as a place of discovery, as source and objects of study that help the historian to identify utopias and deconstruct dystopias through their literary and problematized narratives. Another no less relevant aspect, like their brothers, newspapers, magazines often took on the role of counterpower, refusal of the status quo, and even political counterweight. As political counterweight, they exercise their state power, the fifth power. As part of the fifth power on the state, the magazine had to fight at certain times of periods of contemporary Portuguese history against censorship, the famous blue pencil. Like newspapers, magazines also suffered censorship during the constitutional monarchy, but especially during the First Republic, especially during World War I, the military dictatorship and the Estado Novo. Paradoxically or not, magazines have often functioned as information vehicles or even as supplementary organs of indoctrination, propaganda, and fierce defense of the installed political power. it is important not to forget this duplicity to understand this apparent paradox: political balance versus official or unofficial media. To better understand its role in the public space that Habermas spoke about, and consequently the impact of the formation of public opinion and publishing. We are here, therefore, talking above all about the political influence of magazines, to which it is important to add their relevance in creating and informing and critical public opinions. As means of contesting or defending installed political power, magazines were many things. One, the magazines were privileged stage of political, ideological, doctrinal, literary, and aesthetic controversies among themselves. Some of these controversies were epic. For example, the controversies between tradicionalistas and modernistas, ceareiros versus integralistas, presentistas contra neorrealistas, autoritários contra neofascistas, etc. We even had several examples of magazines that were created in the first place to combat another magazines, as was the case among many others of politics magazines of the ultras of Salzarism, which emerged to face the cultural dominance of magazines Vertis and Seara Nova, and to criticize Marcelismo, which they saw as an ideological deviation from the Estado Novo. Two, the magazines anticipated in their page the theorization and emergence of new political, literacy, philosophical, and doctrinal movements, which fainted and deconstructed the old schools and existing social hierarchies. Three, the magazines were organs of new generations of plastics artists, illustrators, cartoonists, and caricaturists who whipped out the prevailing inertia and abulia. Four, the magazines were archives of literacy, humorous, cultural, essayistic, artistic, and graphic collaboration of great and purified. Five, magazines were launching ramps for auspicious and successful political, journalistic, literacy, and artistic careers. Finally, the magazines were workshops of paraliterature and disruptive or fracturing biological, literary, and aesthetic projects. We can easily see, when interpreting the facts, information, and data contained in its page, that the magazines were laboratories of artistic, aesthetic, literary, and political ideas, and organs of the respective movements that germinate in them. We are here, therefore, when we speak of the historical interpretation of our object of study, speaking of hermeneutics. Well, during this stage of the exercise of historical knowledge, magazines can obtain another dimension, acquired a posteriori, being themselves subject to another experimentation, also laboratory, but now of interdisciplinarity between the social and human science, namely in the conceptual field, through the use of the operative concepts from other social science applied to history. For what purpose? For example, to make the ultimate purpose of this editorial project intelligible. It is only through the cultivation of knowledge, not only theoretical, but also practical, between different science, that we are able to discover the ontological reason of these publications, of their existence. In other words, ensuring the necessary knowledge with a minimum of truth, as well as overcoming the constraints of particularization. Another aspect that is rarely considered in historical studies about magazines is that they should be seen by the historian as a cultural product. There is enormous research work to be done here, which meets the umbilical relationships of these literary and artistic spheres with the literate and even illiterate public. Small, it's true, and with few financial resources, but also the cheap price of magazines. Consequently, this type of press, together with newspapers, tends to create a cosmopolitan audience, explained by the relationship, also umbilical, between text and image. The illustrated press, satirical and humorous magazines have an added importance because illustration, print marketing, photography, comic drawing, caricature, political or social, and comics are the medium from which the mass they get in touch with reality, know what is happening in their parish, in their country, in Europe, and in the rest of the world. As we mentioned above, the magazines disseminated political, social, economic, and cultural ideas, marked aesthetic ruptures, gave rise to new movements in the field of literature, cartoon, caricature, and even comics. They were organs for dissemination of these same movements. Therefore, they must be understood as vehicles, instruments from which those ideas gain value. In other words, the ideas disseminated by magazines are endowed with strength and the capacity to emancipate. The contemporaneous connect to them are aware of the power of emancipation of the ideas contained in their pages. Therefrom, the need for a means to disseminate locally, nationally, and internationally, which is achieved through the production, printing, and distribution of magazines and newspapers in the public square. The strength of the lights is not in the lights, is in the public promotion of the lights, in their capacity for emancipation or disruption. Like the news in the newspaper, the article published in magazines creates reality. Reality is not what exists, but what is found in newspapers, magazines, and serials. For a fact to exist, it's not enough that it happens, it also needs to be reported, whether in newspapers or magazines, regardless of the journalistic genre. Like the news in the newspaper, the magazine article also has a dynamic role. We are therefore faced with the structure invigorated by information and which explores not a sense of obligatory evolution, but its potential characteristics which, through the news, are realized, that is, that have passed from possible to real. The news brought to reality the morally potential and without sufficient strength for it to be imposed. Inseparable from this theory is to understand the importance of magazines for the intellectual, the publicist, and the artist, namely for their appearance, formation, publicity, and public affirmation of their ideas. They make periodicals their way of life. They live by making them, writing in them, selling them to their readers at newsstands, through subscriptions, taking them to their own if necessary. In the collective sense, the intellectual, the publicist, and the artist need a stage, a platform, a tool, a vehicle, a transmission belt. In short, they need the press for an intervention at the moment. The intellectual, the publicist, and the artist intervene in the public space through magazines and newspapers, whether through regular or episodic collaboration, or in the very publications they found and direct. The sense of his literary, artistic, and essays production is or has been published in these publications. This applies both to the 19th and 20th centuries. In order to make the cultural history of Portugal in this period, we cannot dispense the magazines, since the empirical evidence that they make available to the historian, which must later be interpreted rationally, it's large and multifaceted. The opposite is that is not possible. That is, to make the history of Portuguese culture ignoring them, passing over them. Writing in certain publications, namely in those that disseminate the most significant artists, literary and ideological movements that crossed the 19th and 20th centuries, gives a kind of...
You have 3 minutes, okay?
How much?
3 minutes.
3 minutes?
Yeah.
Oh my God. Gives a kind of intellectual or artistic measure to count, a means to exist collectively. And those movements that we refer to, like the schools and current associated with them, exist and create reality because there is a press, because there are magazines, because there are newspapers. These publications are therefore a living organ. We start with some methodological warnings that are important to bear in mind when looking at the history of magazines. Because I have no much time, I will speak only about one of these warnings, and after that I finish my conference with a small conclusion. First, warning among others, what we call the dangers of the overly restrictive classification of the press, shaped in the categorizations by press genres or by types of journalism. It is true that in some cases we may have magazines and newspapers that are source and objects of study which, due to their informative skill and the way they are organized informatively, can easily be arranged in categories mentioned above. But for the most part, what we have is a polyhedral multimodal raw material, that is, a solid that has many phases, which can refer to micro or macro history exercises. We even have cases in which the titles and subtitles of periodicals themselves immediately invite the historian to arrange them in a certain kind of press or type of journalism that are obvious, but which, after being analyzed in detail, led to great surprise with other realities. Read themes, informative content, literary and artistic collaboration, controversial and subtle objectives that lead us to other methods, other purposes, other categories. To finish with a small conclusion, we therefore need a new approach to guide us through the compact, confusing, and complex maze of magazines. In other words, we need a new history of the newspapers, which meets the theoretical and methodological considerations that we have presented here. The only way, in our opinion, to place them where they deserve to be, as source and objects of study of nuclear importance in modern cultural history, contemporary, and the periodicals press in particular. Importance translated in histories of Portugal into autonomous chapters, or preferably crossed and worked with political, social, economic, and mental history. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Álvaro Costa de Campos, for this very interesting presentation. And we have already some questions that we'll put in the end. And now we will pass to the second presentation. The title is "I Do Not Know What Is in Your Newspaper, Content Analysis of Braille Magazines." And I salute Ibrahim Omara from Tanta University from Egypt. Hello, Ibrahim. Ibrahim?
Hello?
Hello, hello.
You can hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, I have my presentation, but for some accessibility issues, I couldn't present this my slides. So I sent them to Carla, and I hope she will pass them to all attendees, okay?
Okay.
So I will do my presentation.
You have, sorry, Braille, you sent me the presentation for me to pass for you. Did I got it right?
Yeah, that's right. Because
I'm going to see.
Okay. Yeah. I'm gonna to present my work now. It's called. I don't.
Maybe we can wait some minutes for Carla.
Yes, please. Just
to put
okay, we can switch the talk, and my colleague may present his work until she pass this presentation.
What do you think, Carla?
Just a minute, but we can do that too. I think it's better. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Ibrahim.
Okay.
Thank you. I was right here trying to get it right quickly. So now I can get it quietly. Thanks. Very good idea.
That's a good idea, Ibrahim.
Okay.
So, I will present then the third presentation that will be our second. Hello, Maria Filomena Barradas.
Join the meeting.
Filomena is from Polytechnic Institute of Porto Alegre, from Portugal, and she will presenting Generation K, mapping the Portuguese early 90s through Capa magazine. Wonderful, Filomena. Hello.
Hello. I hope that you are hearing me because I didn't have sound and I was getting a bit worried. Okay, thank you for listening. I will talk a bit about Capa magazine, which for us Portuguese, it's well, I think a memory for many of us. And I will discuss, hopefully, the way I think that Capa helped the Portuguese youngsters from the 90s shape an image of themselves. So I will show you my stuff. Capa was published between 1990 and 1992 in a total of 32 issues, and rapidly became a niche and a cult product. These features are still felt today, I think, because there are several mentions of Capa, not only in internet, but also you can buy, and for me this is, well, a proof that of this niche and cult product that is still in our memories. You can buy entire collections or numbers through OLX, for example, and they, the medium price of a number, it's about 15 euros. Okay, so I think it's a rather expensive magazine and memory product. Okay, so for me, it's during in my PhD, I was interested in a newspaper that was an ancestor, a direct ancestor of Capa, and which was independent. I will not talk about that. I think Capa is very interesting, but the scholars don't seem to pay attention to it. or when they pay attention, they tend to observe it from two different perspectives, from political science, and they argue, and this is true, that Kappa shaped Portuguese right wing, that we have today, and from design. And they argue that Kappa shaped editorial design practices, which is also true. But for me, it's always, I'm not at ease with this. I come from literary studies because these two perspectives tend to ignore Kappa as a cultural artifact. So they pose these arguments, but they seem to ignore the impact that the magazine, for me, seems to have in the early 19th in Portugal. So this is my departure point. We have to also to look at Kappa in broader context of historical transformation, which is this magazine appeared because we were finally in a democracy, because finally there was money around to put out a very rich and well done magazine from the editorial point of view, and this was done since the revolution of 1974, and it went on till the 90s. It's inseparable from Miguel Esteves Cardoso, who is this fellow with this curly hair and round glasses, who was a star journalist, perhaps, or star columnist during the 80s. And that in 1988 was a founder of the weekly newspaper O Independent, and then of Kappa magazine in 1990. So this is what happened. I will try to pose my argument now. In his first issue, editorial, Kappa proposed, and this is my translation, that its main this main goal was to be communicative rather than informative. This for me, it's very interesting, because if we go back to the origin of the words, to communicate means to put in common, to build community, whereas informative means to inform, to give form. So what I think is that Kappa tried not also to put out content that was based on the needs of that target audience that we can imagine or think about, these young Portuguese city dwellers, but also these young Portuguese city dwellers found in the magazine information how to become a Portuguese urbanite, or how can be cosmopolitan. For me, this was done mainly through three communicative strategies. First of all, the image, the use of image and photography. Then the use of what I call here an ironic nostalgia, and in third place, humor. Well, photography is really important in Kappa. This has been studied for mainly for people from design, and all the pictures that I choose to be an example of this point are from what they call in the magazine fotoreportagem, which can be translated like photo essay. The main Inês Gonçalves will be one of the names that stands out as a photographer. She is the author of this first issue cover, which I find always beautiful. And these are boys from an institution, which is Casa do Gaiato, which has boys that don't have family over there, and they are photographed in a beach where they are doing their vacation. Okay, so this picture here in the left, it's from the photo essay of that first number. It is called Gaiatos. This old man here, it's very appealing for me because I'm from Alentejo, and it's the photo essay, it's Alentejo. The girl, it's Norte Nome de Portugal, also in a photo essay from Inês Gonçalves. And then the first one, it's not from Inês Gonçalves, it's from Augusto Brásio. And the photo essay's title is O Verão dos Bimbos, which can be translated pretty much as the rednecks summer. This is, for me, since image has been always connected with this kind of nostalgia and the idea of that the magazine is right-wing. This is true, but for me, all these images are they communicate, they talk to me through this idea of aura. They are not only testimony, but they are also aesthetic objects, and they resemble this family album that all of us have. And also they put us in connection with an idea of the country outside of the town. A country that is reinventing itself, because we lost our colonies, we entered EEC, so who are we as Portuguese right now? This is one point. Another point is that ironic nostalgia that is connected with image. And I chose here two of the covers of Kappa. the first one is the issue number 2, and the last one is the last issue of Kappa. We have Marcel Caetano and Salazar, which are, well, they were our rulers for many, many years. So we can think about this as a thing. Oh, we feel, I will use the words in Portuguese, we feel saudade of Salazar and Caetano. But I really don't think that that's it. I really think that this nostalgia, which is the desire to return to an idealized time, goes through irony. And then what we have, it's not this direct desire, but a more like a desire to return to an old time, knowing that I cannot go there. That belongs only to in my imagination. Finally, one thing that one feels immediately, it's that all of this goes through humor. I will not, because humor, it's very linguistic. It's really hard to explain this and how it is funny for me, because, for example, in this example I chose, we have a stanza from Troubadour, which is translated to Portuguese. And we go to up and down, because I have to know what is this kind of poetry and what kind of concepts are used there. So when, for example, a word like coita, which is suffering, and gives in Portuguese coitado, which is a thing that we feel and suffer still, it's turning to queca, which is a slang for coitus. As Portuguese, I can relate to this, and I can laugh at this. And I laugh still more because I have done a bit of explanation, a commentary, like I was playing around about literary analysis, okay? So this is done in every of the issues that we have, just for playing, just being fun. All these aspects help us to create a space of communion with this magazine.
Maria Filomena, you have 5 minutes, okay?
I'm heading. All this image, this ironic take on past, that's it's well, we live with this today. If we have this nostalgia when we go to, for example, this is discussed by some people, that, for example, we have a big business which is Vida Portuguesa, that sells out memorabilia from the 60s and 70s. But the way I relate to that, it's double. It's like, this helps me to know myself as a member of this community, but also reassures me that, well, I don't live really in that time. Also, the humor here, it's, well, I think humor, it's really a way to get people together and to put people aside, because we put aside those who don't have the same sense of humor of us, okay? So I think that this magazine did this all the time. This is my private collection of kappa. These are my final remarks. At the time when Portugal was undergoing profound social changes, kappa made its contribution to an emergence of a cosmopolitan and urbanite consciousness, forging with its readers a community fed by a symbolic capital made of images, nostalgia, irony, and humor. Conceiving kappa only as an example for right-wing thinking or editorial design innovation is to downsize its cultural dimension. We believe, however, this is a small step towards understanding the importance of this publication, and its exceptionality should continue to be investigated. Okay. Thank you for your time, and for me, I will answer everything you want. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Maria Filomena, for your very interesting presentation. There are a lot, not a few, a lot of questions for you to answer, but we will pass on to Ibrahim. Ibrahim, can you turn on the sound?
Faça já share.
Okay. Ibrahim, so our technical team will pass the presentation. So all you have to do is, when you want the team to pass on the slide, you just say it, okay?
I don't know if it's...
Okay, Ibrahim.
When I want to pass, can you say it again, please?
So I will, can you tell when the technical team can pass the slide?
Okay. I can say next.
Okay. Thank you so much. So Ibrahim.
Sorry, Dora, how is going to be done? Ibrahim said what Ibrahim told us to. How is going to tell us to pass the slides?
Yeah. Yes. Right.
How?
Okay.
But sorry, how is Ibrahim going to do it? Please, he's going to say it, or he's going to make a sign. Please, just for us to tell. We'll discover. Let's go.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you all for giving me this chance to present my work. I conducted a study about the content of Braille magazines. Next we will start. Yeah, we know that the visually impaired can use their senses. They can use the hearing sense. They can use their touch to access information. And we can say that the visually impaired have two categories of information access tools. The traditional information methods, such as the talking newspapers, the Braille magazines, and the magazines in large print. Next. We would say also that the visually impaired have new methods to access the information. For example, DAISY, also visual reality techniques. So one day I thought about this idea. If someone who don't have visual impairment watch someone who is visually impaired, reading a Braille magazine, what is the first question will jump in your mind? The first question would be, what are the articles in this Braille magazines? What is covered in this Braille publication? So I have conducted this study to tell the sighted people what is covered in these Braille magazines. Next, I'm talking about the objectives of my study. This study seeks to determine the common subjects areas in Braille magazines. Also examine the primary sources of the magazine articles. Identify how many articles were close to the visual impairment field to know if the Braille magazines published articles of interest to this community. Next, we will move to the related work. When you try to search for the Braille magazines on Google Scholar or any other scholarly database, you will find it hard to find a lot of studies done in this area. So I focused on three territories or three areas. One of them is information seeking behaviors among the people with visual impairment. The second one is the information sources for people with visual impairment. The third thing I searched for the role of the libraries for providing people with visual impairment with magazines in accessible formats. And we will get to discuss this point furthermore at the discussion section. Next, we will talk about the study questions. My study thought to answer 4 questions. What are the subject areas discussed in Braille magazines? 2, what are the most popular journalistic forms adopted in Braille magazines? 3, what are the information sources that make up the magazine content? And 4, how much space has been given to the visual impairment field to know if the analyzed magazines focused on visual impairment area or not. Next, we will talk about the methodology. I conducted content analysis of the Braille magazines, and I used the content analysis tool. And when we are talking about this point, we have to differentiate between 2 categories of Braille magazines, or we can say it, magazines for the visually impaired. The first type, we are talking about the Braille magazines produced by and for the visually impaired themselves. And the second type is just a translation, a Braille translation of regular magazines. So in the United States, you may find a Braille version of the New York Times, or in the United Kingdom, you may find a Braille version of the Guardian, and so and so. So my study was more concerned about those produced by and for the visually impaired. So I have not been focusing about the other type, which are the regular newspapers. So I looked at those Braille magazines from 5 variables. First one, the field. Second one, the journalistic form. The third one, source of the article. The fourth one, attitude, to know if the article portrayed the people with visual impairment in a positive manner or in a negative manner. The fifth variable was the relevance. The article that focused on the visually impaired issues or the issues that are of importance for this community is relevant, and vice versa. I mean, the other articles that focused on other areas, I counted it as irrelevant. Next, sample. I used the convenient sample technique in my study. I focused on the Braille magazines in the United States. I put 4 criteria for the inclusion of the Braille magazines. First of all, the magazines should be published in the United States. It had to be available as electronic file, have a large number of subscribers. And someone would ask me why the magazine should be available as electronic file. Simply because I contacted the publisher to get those magazines as an electronic file, and I can read them using my Braille display so that I can conduct the analysis in Egypt so that I don't have to travel to the United States or everywhere to get those Braille magazines, due to the fact that they are bulky and they are hard to be delivered via mail or something like that between countries. So next, the magazines and the name of the magazines, I put the table that include the 3 magazines that I selected, the publisher, and the URL and the number of the articles that I have analyzed. We have the Braille Monitor. It's published by the National Federation of the Blind. Next one, we have the Braille Forum. It's published by the American Council of the Blind. And last, we have our special, and it's published by the American Braille Press, which is one of the greatest organizations that help the people with visual impairment. So that we move to the results next. And we have this statistics that describe the main results of my study. Next, we will talk about the field of the, what are the fields discussed in Braille magazines. We have in the Braille Monitor focused on the education themes, and we have in the we have this example about these topics, article entitled "Helen Keller No More in Texas." So that this article talked about one of the issues in the United States, focusing about the education. if we move to the Braille forum, we found that this magazine focused about the ACP events, because this magazine is produced by the American Council for the Blind, so that it published the news and the events of this organization. But if we talk about the our special, we find that the health jumped on the top of the fields in this magazine, and this may be a great idea if we can utilize these publications to raise the awareness of people with visual impairment about the public health issues, something like coronavirus, so that we can get to those people and spread the awareness in these publications. If we talk about the second variable, we are talking about journalistic forms. We found that news counted as the most prevalent journalistic form in the three Braille magazines. And this was astonishing to me to know that news stories were the most prevalent journalistic form in these magazines, because we are familiar by the fact that magazines don't include a lot of news, but we can say that this may be justified by the fact that Braille magazines would be the only source for those people to get news, so that this may be different from sighted people who may get the information and the news from other sources. If we talk about the third variable, well, we can talk about the sources of these articles. We found that in the Braille forum and Braille monitor, we find the editor, the magazine editor, is the most prevalent source of these articles. I mean that most of the articles were written by the magazine editor, while we, in contrast, in the our special magazine, we found that the internet websites counted as the first source of news articles in our special. The fourth variable, which is the attitude. As I mentioned to you, where I separated or categorized the articles.
Ibrahim, sorry, you have 5 minutes, okay?
Okay. We have positive and negative and mutual, and we found that most of the articles were positive. I mean, they talk about positive topics or themes for the people with visual impairment. The last one, which is the relevance, we found that most of the articles that have been published in those Braille magazines were of a great importance to those people. I mean, they target this group and talk about this group. If we can try to summarize the results, as I mentioned to you, we found that the most prevalent sources are the internet and the editor. And last but not least, I want to raise 3 questions at the end of my presentation. The first one, we have to ask, what is the most suitable reading format for the people with visual impairment? Is it the Braille, the audio, or digital? The second question we have to ask now, if the visually impairment community want to read the Braille magazines dedicated for them, or they want to read the regular newspaper. And the last question we have to ask, why the national libraries in the Western countries take this responsibility to produce Braille magazines for the blind. I'm wondering why we don't have a room in the New York Times or the Guardian or whatever, a room for people who work to produce the Braille version for the visually impaired. Because I'm not sure, although the people in the library have the experience about producing these magazines for the blind. Thank you for giving me your time and your attention, and I will be happy to receive your questions.
Okay, thank you so much, Ibrahim. Thank you all the participants and the auditorium. So we will pass to some questions that that we have here in the chat. So first for Álvaro. Álvaro, Oliver Scheiding is saying that from an epistemological perspective, couldn't we analyze magazines as little archives? As such, they participate in the knowledge production of modernity. And from a sociological perspective, couldn't we discuss magazines as mediators, shaping the content which they transmit? This is the question for Álvaro. You have to activate the sound.
I think both perspectives are valid. Can you repeat the question because in some part I can't hear.
So what Oliver is asking if it is important to analyze magazines as archives, as little archives, yes, because they contribute to the production of knowledge, yes, and from a sociological perspective, if they are mediators.
Yes, yes. As I say, both perspectives are valid. But in the historical perspective, I analyze the both perspective, sociological and epistemological. It's analysis with the both perspective. Because when I analyze magazines like little archives, we found a lot of content, a lot of information, and from different perspectives. For example, when I study some political magazines during the Estado Novo, this dimension is there. They are not just a simple magazine, but archives of literacy, political, philosophical issues. So for me, those perspectives are valid when we analyze magazines from a historical perspective.
Okay, thank you so much, Álvaro. Filomena, can you switch on the Maria Filomena? Can we switch? Yes.
Sí.
So,
yes.
Teresa has a passion for Kappa magazine, she says, and she asked if you worked about the photojournalism on Kappa magazine, because Kappa was essential to the affirmation of photojournalism.
Well, I studied with commas. I understand the question, although that's not really my perspective, and I will explain why. The thing is, what appeals to me, it's not the photojournalistic aspect, it's the aesthetics. I think that in one way they cannot be separated, but for me, aesthetics, it's more important because I don't think that they are making photojournalism as a way of giving a testimony or to, there are some cases in which this really happens, but I discussed, I don't think, for example, when I see the photo essay Alentejo, well, I should, I don't have the pictures here, but as a person who always lived in Alentejo, that those images, okay, they are related to this region, okay, people are like that, but also they are conveying an idea about this place of the country rather than to document this place really. Okay, so for me, this aesthetics, it's heavier than the documental aspect.
Okay. So Oliver asked you if you know if Kappa magazine was influenced by the British magazine The Face.
I don't know the face. I don't know the face, so I cannot give a straight answer. But we know that Miguel Esteves Cardoso, the founder, is a person that is heavily influenced by the British. So probably with high probably this happens. Its goal, his goal, it's to bring. He began his columns by showing the Portuguese the music from UK, post-punk music. So all this is highly influenced, not only by the magazines from Britain, but also I think there's a question about humor by British humor, because it's really, well, for us Portuguese, okay, it's really different, but we were acquainted with this kind of humor through, for example, I think, it's my opinion, through Herman José and their programs, which is a very verbal humor. It's not, it has not to do with, well, it's very witty. I think the best word to describe this, it's wittiness. We have to enclose many senses that are put there, and we have are always being called on to undisclose what is being said. So I think it's what happens.
Okay, we will get to you again, but first we have some questions for Ibrahim. So Ibrahim, let me see, sorry, Tim Holmes is asking if the audio content is a topic interesting for your paper. You didn't mention the audio, but is it interesting for partially sighted readers?
Audio settings, زر قائمة.
Okay, you can hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. This is a good question. And I ended my paper by saying that a good avenue for a future study would be analyzing the audio newspapers. But I can tell you that most of the visually impaired prefer to read Braille magazines more than listening to audio newspapers or talking newspapers, due to the fact that when you are reading a Braille magazine, you can have a strong focus because reading is more, you can concentrate more than listening, because so that most of these studies, the previous studies said that the people can listen to the talking books or newspaper, even the sighted people, and for relaxing and before sleeping, you know, so that the visually impaired appreciate reading Braille magazines more than audio newspapers.
Okay, so Teresa Flores asked you, why did you choose the Braille magazines from USA, from the United States?
That's the great, because I have been to the School of Media and Journalism in North Carolina, United States, so that I get access to the Braille magazines there, and I have the inclination to expand my work, studying other Braille magazines in Europe and the Middle East. But the only fact is, the only difficulty would be how can I get those Braille magazines? Because as I mentioned to you, it's hard for me to obtain them as a hard copy. So if they are available as electronic files, I can use them using my Braille display to analyze them.
Okay, but Joey, in this context, Joe is asking if any of the Braille magazines have more of an activist stance for advocating for people with disabilities in the USA.
That's a good point. The fact that Braille is, reading Braille is shrinking globally for now. And I'm talking about the new generation who may be stuck to the new technologies because, you know, the portability and the availability of new devices make those new generations more addicted to digital journalism or new types of journalism. But still there are a lot of people, I'm talking about the older people, who prefer to read Braille as a hard copy. But I can tell you that Braille is shrinking, and my studies, in my studies, I'm trying to advocate myself because I am visually impaired myself. But I have to say that the Braille magazines, like other news media or other media for sighted people, have to reinvent itself to or reintroduce itself to the readers.
So there is a value in Braille versions, the tangible magazine, as Sharon put it, for you. So what do you say about this?
I'm saying, as I mentioned to you, when we compare between Braille magazine, audio or digital, we can't say that this is best and this is a better, because this is the reality that we have to live in this realm with different formats, like sighted people, because each format suits a particular condition. When you are sitting in the train or the public transportation, you may find it's hard to listen to audio newspaper, so that you may find Braille magazine is more suitable. And also when you don't have access to the internet or laptop or mobile devices, you have to use the Braille magazine. So that, as I mentioned to you, we have to live with all these alternatives that suit different situations for different people, because we are talking about that as a global phenomena. Braille magazine, we can find them in the United States, in Europe, and in the Middle East.
Okay, so one last question from Tim Holmes to Ibrahim. Are there many or any Braille magazines that are not produced by organizations for the blind or partially sighted?
Yeah, if I can get the question right, I would say in the United States, I found that a lot of regular newspapers are produced in Braille for the blind, and I can say that also in the United Kingdom, but other countries I couldn't find a lot of regular newspapers that are available in Braille. Here in Egypt, in my country, we have only one Braille magazine, and like as I mentioned to you, this industry face the same struggles and the difficulties that other magazines and other newspapers face everywhere.
Okay, thank you so much, Ibrahim. We have two other questions, the final questions for Maria Filomena. Can you activate the sound, please?
Yes.
So, Tim Holmes, these questions are related to each other. So Tim Holmes is asking you if the kind of playfulness in the language you analyzed as a Portuguese characteristic is contributing to the construction of the imagined community in the imagined past. And then Teresa is saying that humor and rebellion was probably most expected from left-wing partisans. However, this was, as you told us, about the right-wing magazine. Do you think that the magazine was most read by the right-wingers as well?
Well, if one looks at the names of people who made the magazine, we will find out that these people came from right wing and from the left wing. It's a very diverse space from a political perspective, and that is my point. Scholars tend to see these as well as independent as examples of right-wing journalism, although I think, yes, they present themselves as conservatives, but they are, when one reads Kappa or Independent, one reads that and feels that they are a thing. I think for me the best way to describe them, it's libertarians. Okay, so they the newsroom as people from the left, from the right, and they do a mix which also continues outside the magazine, because one thing that scholars point out is that these people, these young people, live in the streets of Lisbon. They gather in the pubs that were I don't know how to say it in English, but they were full of young people getting out and mingle. It was a movida in the 90s, in the 80s and 90s in Lisbon. the humor, I think, it has the ability to, well, I think they try to teach us, to teach the Portuguese, or to teach the young Portuguese of the late 80s, early 90s, that were other ways to laugh. Because, but this is complete, I don't have any information about this, it's only my opinion. Because, well, humor was really, I think, really connected with, for example, musical theater, revista, and then to, well, physical humor. And these guys, Miguel Esteves Cardoso, Herman José, I think they reinvent the way that humor was done in Portugal, which is a very more verbal, more British, if you want to do so. And this trend, I think it still is happening. And this for us Portuguese, this, I think we can say this when produções fictícias are writing, when gatos Durante are writing, it's this kind of humor, not a physical humor, but a verbal humor that goes to our daily lives, to mock our daily lives, and this, we find this being played in this in Kappa, also in the Independent, and that is my point. They are doing a way. They are trying to do a new kind of humor, and now we are doing this like they told us they taught us to do. So in that sense, I think that helped us to reinvent ourselves as a community. Okay, so.
Okay, one final question from Teresa Flores for you. Do you see any relation to the modernists defended by António Ferro?
I don't know, because I have to be, I didn't study this. I should have done that, but so I don't know how to answer this. Perhaps, but it's so, well, I think that for us, I don't know, it's merely an opinion. For us Portuguese, we see all this take on the past always as saudade and oh, I wish I go there and live there. And I really think, and when I read Kappa and when I read Windpendent, because I was not really at the same time, I don't feel this to be true. Okay, it's a bit different. Well, they are conservatives, but they know they cannot take back or bring back Stadnov. It doesn't make sense to them. They really enjoy liberty and freedom, and they are always telling us to be free. I think it's when I read it, I feel very free. It's very liberating because it's crazy and it's funny, but it's also serious. It's like, for me, it's right, like being in a totally different way of thinking what the Portuguese are. So that for me, that's why it must be studied.
Okay, thank you so much for your wonderful presentations. Thank you for to Lusófona University. Thank you, the auditorium. And we are right on time. It's 4 o'clock and we have the next panel. So goodbye, everyone. And thank you all.